Hi. So now is a very interesting time to be in photography. Never before have we been bombarded with images at such a fast pace that it's asking photographers many questions. One of them being, how do we make our photos stand out in a world that is so full of pictures? In my opinion, one of the solutions is finding a personal perspective and applying that to your work. Finding a stance, finding a message. Now, as a photographer, I will never be an impartial observer. I have feelings. What I see, what I experience is always going to invoke an emotional response. That being said, when I go out to take photos, I look for those connections because I feel that photography doesn't have to be just about facts. It can also be the emotional reflection on facts. And I want my viewers to understand this. I want them to know that my pictures are not just a visual document, that it is actually interpretive. What's also very important for viewers to understand is that photography or a photo cannot tell the whole story. All right? It can only tell a fraction. And I love this slide. I think it illustrates that really great, that a photo can only take a small bite out of a big story. So enough talking. I want to show some photos to illustrate this point. The first photo is 1994, Haiti. US troops are sent to the country. And here they are, off the helicopter, guns ready, prepared to face any foe that comes their way. But at least this is the impression that this photographer wanted us to have. There was another photographer on the scene who had a different perspective. This is Alex Webb's photograph. A photographer is taking photos of the same exact soldiers. So putting them side by side, we see that one scene can yield two totally different stories. And they use the same tools of photography, composition, lighting, waiting for that moment, and ultimately perspective. So moving forward, I want to talk about some of my work and how it relates to this. And since we're on the topic of Haiti, I want to show you some of my Haiti work. I've been to this country a few times, the first time in 2010, right after the earthquake, and it was an absolutely devastating event. And there are a lot of photographers there, and me and them, we photographed a ton of rubble, people trapped under the rubble, looters, corpses on top of corpses, crime. This man was shot and killed and dragged into the middle of the road, and humanitarian efforts. Here, US soldiers were sent for a different reason. Now, these photos are incredibly sensational and very, very gruesome. But that was the perspective of that time. And these are a lot of the photos that people were seeing coming out of the country, but that's what it was. It was a certain perspective. So going back to the country a few times, I wanted to tell a different story. Still tell a story that brought attention to people in need of assistance, but I wanted to make it more personal and more interpretive. So I chose this story, a story of a community that lives in Cité Soleil, which is a part of Port-au-Prince, on the outskirts of the city. And they live on what is arguably the largest garbage dump in the country. So as far as the eye can see, it's trash. And it's burning trash. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it's always on fire, causing this massive smoke, making it an incredible health hazard to people who are around the area. And these people live there all day, all night. They make houses, they raise families, they spend their days in and around the trash. And the trash is their means of survival. They sift through the garbage looking for rotten food, looking for scrap metal that they can sell. But the one thing that really spoke to me was that despite their circumstances, this community had a big affinity for each other, like a kinship that I didn't find in other parts of the world. And I didn't want to portray them as victims because it was their decision to live here, obviously because all other options were exhausted. But I felt it was more important to celebrate their tenacity to live and their motivation to move forward than anything else. And this quietness, this serenity that the community felt, even despite there's this looming thing of trash in the background. And I love this photo because instead of a child who would be like him in another part of the world laying in a bed of flowers, this child is laying in a bed of bottles. And it really spoke to me because it kind of says that he's trying to make the best out of his situation. And honestly, I saw more smiles on these people's faces than I do sometimes in the streets of New York City. one of the conflicting things that were going on in my head was how to illustrate what I thought was the beauty of the environment. Because on one hand, it was a terrible place. It was disgusting. It's a humongous, kilometers of trash. But then on the other hand, it was actually, it had this very amazing aesthetic quality. And so it's conflicted. I didn't, should I portray it as beautiful but on one hand, I felt it was disgusting. But at the end of the day, I kicked my rational brain out and I let the visual side of me take over and the personal side, because I wanted to make this an interpretive story that was based on my perspective. So you see the transition from my original photos that were incredibly sensational, gruesome, but now they've kind of turned into something more personal, more interpretive, but still using photography as a means to give people a voice who wouldn't otherwise have one. Now, the next body of work I want to talk about was my first photo project I did as a photographer. And it's about the NYPD unit called Impact. So I followed this unit comprised only of rookie police officers who just came right out of police academy in patrolling the South Bronx, their first beat. When I first started this story, I really had an intention to tell a Hollywood drama, a TV show vibe type of thing that, police helicopters looking for criminals on the rooftops, cops going through doors with their guns out, putting everything on the line, cops going to people's aid who needed help, and of course the arrests. Now all these photos are incredibly important because these are the everyday experiences of a police officer. But the more I spent time with them, the more I started to be attracted to another element to being a police officer, and that was the human side to being a police officer. I want to tell the story about what it was like to actually wear the uniform, to wear the shield, the long, boring nights in the lonely hallways, dealing with supervisors you wouldn't otherwise really want to deal with, eating fast food chicken on the roof night after night after night on the paperwork. So now my story is actually starting to transition from what was a Hollywood TV drama to something more personal, something more geared towards the humanity of these people who are working this job. Now, I still love these photos, the photos that inspire, that the courage, the danger, what's lurking around the corner. And I think there is definitely a place for this because it is a very dangerous job. But if you actually turn the camera around and look at their face, you don't see courage, you don't see bravery, you see weariness, them being tired, tenacity, and sometimes fear. And it is a very emotional job. Also, what happens to cops when they're out of the public's eye, when they go behind closed doors, when they go on rooftops? But they are still police officers, and they do have to enforce the law. And it's very easy to make assumptions about certain photographs. But going back to what I said earlier, that a photograph can never tell an entire story, try not to assume until you see the next picture. And there are some lighthearted moments too. And police officers like me and you are partially byproducts of what they experience. And talking about this job, that means a lot. So again, you see the story kind of transition from my original intention to something completely different in the end. So I invite you, when you look at photographs, look at them, ask questions, ask where they came from, what do they mean, and just don't look about photographs that you see. Think about photographs that you take, and have opinion, have a viewpoint, and embrace your emotions. It can only lead to a good thing. Thank you.